I think the intuition that inequality is divisive and socially corrosive has been around since before the French Revolution. What's changed is we now can look at the evidence, we can compare societies, more and less equal societies, and see what inequality does. I'm going to take you through that data and then explain why the links that I think I'm going to be showing you exist. This shows you life expectancy against gross national income, how rich countries are on average. And you see the countries on the right, like Norway and the USA, are twice as rich as Israel, Greece, Portugal on the left. And it makes no difference to their life expectancy at all. There's no suggestion of a relationship there. But if we look within our societies, there are extraordinary social gradients in health, running right across society. This again is life expectancy. These are small areas of England and Wales, the poorest on the right, the richest on the left. Not a difference between the poor and the rest of us. Even the people just below the top have less good health than the people at the top. So income means something very important within our societies and nothing between them. The explanation of that paradox is that within our societies we're looking at relative income or social position, social status, where we are in relation to each other and the size of the gaps between us. And as soon as you've got that idea, you should immediately wonder, what happens if we widen the differences or compress them, make the income differences bigger or smaller? And that's what I'm going to show you. I'm not using any hypothetical data. I'm taking data from the UN, it's the same as the World Bank has, on the scale of income differences in these rich developed market democracies. The measure we've used, just because it's easy to understand and you can download it, is how much richer the top 20% than the bottom 20% in each country. And you see in the more equal countries, on the left, Japan, Finland, Norway, Sweden, the top 20% are about 3.5, 4 times as rich as the bottom 20%. But at the more unequal end, UK, Portugal, USA, Singapore, the differences are twice as big. On that measure, we are twice as unequal as some of the other successful market democracies. Now I'm going to show you what that does to our societies. We collected data on problems with social gradients, the kind of problems that are more common at the bottom of the social ladder. Internationally comparable data on life expectancy, on kids' maths and literacy scores, on infant mortality rates, homicide rates, proportion of the population in prison, teenage birth rates, levels of trust, obesity, mental illness, which in the standard diagnostic classification includes drug and alcohol addiction, and social mobility. We put them here all in one index. They're all weighted equally. Where a country is sort of average score on these things. And there you see it in relation to the measure of inequality I've just shown you, which I shall use over and over again in the data. The more unequal countries doing worse on all these kinds of social problems. It's an extraordinarily close correlation. But if you look at that same index of health and social problems in relation to GNP per capita, gross national income, there's nothing there. No correlation anymore. Much. I'm going to show you some of the separate bits of our index. Here, for instance, is trust. It's simply the proportion of the population who agree most people can be trusted. It comes from the World Values Survey. You see at the more unequal end, it's about 15% of the population who feel they can trust others. But in the more equal societies, it rises to 60 or 65%. And if you look at measures of involvement in community life or social capital, very similar relationships, closely related to inequality. This is mental illness. WHO put together figures using the same diagnostic interviews on random samples of the population to allow us to compare rates of mental illness in each society. This is the percent of the population with any mental illness in the preceding year. And it goes from about 8% up to 3 times that. Whole societies with 3 times the level of mental illness of others. And again, closely related to inequality. This is violence. These red dots are American states and the blue triangles are Canadian provinces. But look at the scale of the differences. It goes from 15 homicides per million up to 150. This is the proportion of the population in prison. There's about a tenfold difference there, log scale up the side, but it goes from about 40 to 400 people in prison. That relationship is not mainly driven by more crime. In some places that's part of it. But most of it is about more punitive sentencing, harsher sentencing. And the more unequal societies are more likely also to retain the death penalty.
Visualizations, infographics, data visualizations, they feel like flowers blooming from this medium. But if you look at it directly, it's just a load of numbers and disconnected facts. But if you start working with it and playing with it in a certain way, interesting things can appear and different patterns can be revealed. Let me show you this. Can you guess what this data set is? What rises twice a year, once in Easter, and then 2 weeks before Christmas, has a mini peak every Monday, and then flattens out over the summer? I'll take answers. Chocolate? You might want to get some chocolate in. Any other guesses? Shopping. Yeah, retail therapy might help. Sick leave, yeah, you'll definitely want to take some time off. Shall we see? So, the information guru Lee Byron and myself, we scraped 10,000 status Facebook updates for the phrase break up and broken up, and this was the pattern we found. People clearing out for spring break. Coming out of very bad weekends on the Monday, being single over the summer, and then the lowest day of the year, of course, Christmas Day. Who would do that? So there's a titanic amount of data out there now, unprecedented. But if you ask the right kind of question or you work it in the right kind of way, interesting things can emerge.
With me to the wonderful world of statistics. I bring you to the webpage childmortality.org, you know, where you can get deaths in children below 5 years of age for all countries. It's done by UN specialists, you know, and I will take Kenya as an example. Here you see the data. Don't panic now. Don't panic, you know. I'll help you through this. It looks, you know, nasty like in college when you didn't like statistics, man. But first thing, when you see dots like this, you have to ask yourself, from where do the data come? What is the origin of the data? Is it so that in Kenya there are doctors and other specialists who write the death certificate at the death of the child and it's sent to the statistical office? No. Low-income countries like Kenya still don't have that level of organization. It exists, but it's not complete because so many deaths occur in the home. With the family, and it's not registered. So what we rely on is not incomplete system. We have interviews, we have surveys, and this is highly professional female interviewers who sit down for 1 hour with a woman and ask her about birth history. How many children did you have? Are they alive? If they died, at what age and what year? And then this is done in a representative sample of thousands of women in the country. And put together in what used to be called a demographic health survey report. But these surveys are costly, so they can only be done with 3 to 5 years interval, but they have good quality. So this is a limitation. And all these colored lines here are results. Each color is one survey. But that's too complicated for today, so I'll simplify it for you, and I give you one average point for each survey. And when the expert in the UN have got these surveys in place in their database, then they use advanced mathematical formulas to produce a trend line. And the trend line looks like this. See here? And I was sad, because we could see this reversal in Kenya with an increased child mortality in the 90s. It was so tragic. But in June, I got a mail in my inbox from Demographic Health Survey, and it showed good news from Kenya. I was so happy. This was the estimate of the new survey. I'm going to show you the relation between child mortality on this axis here. This axis here is child mortality, and here I have the family size. The relation between child mortality and family size. 1, 2, 3, 4 children per woman, 6, 7, 8 children per woman. This is once again 1960, 50 years ago. Each bubble is a country. The color, you can see the continent. The dark blue here is sub-Saharan Africa, you know, and the size of the bubble is the population. And these are the so-called developing countries. They had high or very high child mortality, and family size 6 to 8. And the ones over there, they were the so-called Western countries. They had low child mortality and small families. What has happened? What I want you now is to see with your own eyes the relation between falling child mortality and decrease in family size. I just want not to have any room, just to see that for yourself. This is what happened. Now I start the world. Here we come down with eradication of smallpox, better education, you know, health service. It got on there. China comes into the Western box here, you know, and here Brazil is in the Western box. India is approaching. The first African country is coming into the Western box. And we get a lot of new neighbors. Welcome to a decent life. Come on, we want everyone down here. This is the vision we have, isn't it? And look now, the first African countries here are coming in. There we are today. What is the importance now with the relations here? Look. Even if we look in Africa, these are the African countries. You can clearly see the relation with falling child mortality and decreasing family size, even within Africa. It's very clear that this is what happens. And a very important piece of research came out on Friday from the Institute of Health Metrics and Evaluation in Seattle, showing that almost 50% of the fall in child mortality can be attributed to female education. That is when we get girls in school, we will get an impact 15 to 20 years later, which is a secular trend, which is very strong. That's why we must have that long-term perspective, but we must measure the impact over 10 years periods. It's fully possible to get child mortality down in all of these countries and to get them down into the corner where we all would like to live together. And of course, lowering child mortality is a matter of uttermost importance from humanitarian aspects. It's a decent life for children we are talking about. But it is also a strategic investment in the future of all mankind because it's about the environment. We will not be able to manage the environment and avoid the terrible climate crisis if we don't stabilize the world population. Let's be clear about that. And the way to do that is to get child mortality down, get access to family planning, and behind that a drive of female education, and that is fully possible. Let's do it. Thank you very much.
Information.